Kinetic One emerged from aiming to create a clean energy solution that supports human and machine evolution, and also one that promotes sustainability. What inspired me, the realization that AI wouldn't be able to meet the needs of people using the current technology because it wasn't efficient. It wouldn't allow it to manage it in an efficient manner. The mission is to make clean energy the default for both humans and AI systems, which need, to scale up AI, we're going to need reliable and durable technology. And to support humans, we need a system of AI that's always there, not one that possibly might go down in state of an emergency, when we most need it in those most critical times. The one time we wouldn't want AI to go down is during, an event of seismic, a seismic event. So I realized that ultimately the downfall to that would be energy. If we use the land, to produce energy, whether it will be from renewables or whatever, we're destroying the land, by digging it up. Now, all of these things can be resolved by using the ocean, which has 71% surface area of the planet, which means that there's enough of it for us to use, and it's a wasted resource. So from our point of view, the future, um, oil, or not oil, but the future fluid of the planet that's going to keep us going, the oil mines of the future are actually out in the ocean.
Invisible Experts Podcast.
Welcome everyone to this new episode of our podcast channel, Invisible Experts. Today we are very happy. We are very excited, and it's very exciting. I'm very excited actually, having Andrew Karim. Hello, Andrew. How are you?
Hello there, nice to meet you, and nice to join you here today and your community. Hello.
Thank you, man. We really appreciate giving up your time and talk about your
Yeah,
project. And we're
absolutely.
gonna talk about this, which is very relevant. But just to contextualize our audience, if you don't mind, can you share a little bit about your background and what led you to focus on sustainability and tech innovation?
Yeah, so from a fairly young age, I guess I was captivated by electronics and computing, and with I experimented quite a lot with resistors and circuits, capacitors. So I started my career fairly early off my own back. From we're talking in my very much junior years, um, before I even hit senior school. But then in my career, I placed jobs with people like BT, British Telecom, which is the national telephone company in the UK. And I worked on systems, Unix systems, in my work experience days in school. Um, Later on, I worked for Microsoft, NHS, and even Eurostar. And Eurostar was what my first foundational moment, when I remember thinking, the work that I was doing with them, which was very much affiliate work, with regards to my actual websites. But I realized at that stage that I had to build an algorithm for them for for the carbon footprint of trains, compared to planes and cars, and different things like, different forms of transport. And I realized that there's you wouldn't be spending this much money if there wasn't a fundamental problem with the earth. So my genuine use of technology and understanding of technology drove me into realizing that there are other solutions to solve. So during the lockdown, I reflected on the disconnect between the advancing of AI capabilities and the outdated energy technology that we have today, which inspired me to create Active Kinetic One, which is a scalable, non-rotary energy solution to bridge that gap.
Hmm, Fantastic. So I know you just mentioned a little bit, but Would be really interesting to know what inspired you to start Active Kinetic and advocate for impactful solutions in sustainability. I know you mentioned about Eurostar and you start to question yourself. So it was that it to inspire you to start your company?
Yeah, so working for Eurostar allowed me to realize that there was an issue, a global issue, with regards to the way that we're using energy. But the realization that the traditional rotary generators that could not meet the evolving energy demands of AI, and the modern society that drove me, to seek alternatives. I guess that was because I wanted to harness untapped, or I could see these untapped energy sources such as the ocean, and I questioned, how are we going to access and utilize those energy sources at scale, and in an efficient way. So Active Kinetic One emerged from this vision, and I'm aiming to create a clean energy solution, that supports human and machine evolution, and promote, and also one that promotes sustainability. So I guess my what inspired me, were all of the culmination of all of these factors. That the realization that AI wouldn't be able to meet the needs of people using the current technology, because it wasn't efficient. It wouldn't allow it to manage it in an efficient manner.
Sure. I mean, to be nowadays, it's very important, you know, topics such as sustainability, energy efficiency, and so on. AI is very important, undoubtedly. But before we going into these topics, you as a person, Andrew, how come you get inspired and you kind of like think, okay, I want to make a difference in my community, in society? What would you say are your personal drivers? Because professionally speaking, you just mentioned before, the challenges that, technology brings about, the alternative solutions that in a way active kinetic is offering to do that. But for you as a person, what drives you to start and venture into this company?
Yeah, so to be honest, I've always been a problem solver. That's been one of my, things that I've always enjoyed doing, solving problems for people. And I guess that my career took that path, and I really, my one of my last professional roles was working for NHS, for example, and that was to produce a symptoms and diagnosis search results. And it used a Google search appliance in the background, which was on their own network, but these were public servers. So I've always, and it was enjoyment to me. I put extra hours in to make sure that the results were dramatically different from the poor level of results that were being created. So and then prior to that, I worked for Eurostar, which was helping people to use this technology, this train service, as opposed to using flights, which reduce the carbon footprint. And then prior to that, I worked for Microsoft, or I did a number of support and infrastructure roles that helped the development of the digitalization of the world, from Vodafone to T-Mobile. I worked on these infrastructures, and prior to that, I worked for Microsoft, supporting people on the front line, with their PCs and their computers, and their servers and their networks. Banks that literally the server would go down. We would realize the urgency, because people couldn't access, millions of people couldn't access their transactions and just carry on their normal lives. So my world has very much been about um working in jobs that have helped society, to carry on and do the things that they do. Now, Active Kinetic One, um, the mission is to make clean energy the default for both humans and AI systems, which need, to scale up AI, we're going to need reliable and durable technology. And to support humans, we need a system of AI that's always there, not one that possibly might go down in state of an emergency, when we most need it in those most critical times. The one time we wouldn't want AI to go down is during, an event of seismic, a seismic event. So I realized that ultimately the downfall to that would be energy. So our projects actually range from oceanic energy solutions like our AWAC, which is the active wave energy converter, down to really small applications which allow people to produce energy from their own body movements and walking and a car moving, or efficient. You make efficient use of that wasted energy, effectively to empower global sustainability.
Sure, sure. Look, it's so important what we're just talking about. And I like to perhaps start with the problem. You just mentioned you are a problem solver, right? So, in your own words or from your own perspective, how would you tell our audience what's the problem, man? I mean, what's going on with energy, and uh, what are the main problem that you want to solve? That from your perspective, the world is the biggest challenge in terms of sustainability.
So, in the biggest challenge in terms of sustainability, quite honestly, is that the energy that we've been using and we've had the luxury of using for quite some time now is finite. Fossil fuels are finite. They will run out one day in the future, and the reality is that we're probably abusing, these chemicals that could be used in so many different ways. We all know that, or many people know that. Oil produces plastics, which we use for medical supplies, plastics which we use for really keeping things from from water resistance. Also, we use plastics for so many, such a variety of things, from clothing to so many different things. So if we use all of this finite supply and burn it away, then 100 years, 1,000 years, 10,000 years in the future, what are those people? What are our future generations? What are we offering, leaving behind for them? Nothing. I guess so. By replacing that with a clean energy source, we are actually solving a future sustainability issue. Not to mention that all of these fuels that we're burning are completely destroying our current environment. So we need something that will, our focus is on using natural forces with cutting edge technology to provide a solution, a sustainable solution. For example, the wave energy converters will harness wave energy and convert that into electricity so that we can use that in every part of the globe. There is 71% of the entire world's surface is covered by ocean. So that only leaves 29% of land. Um, Now, we're currently using renewable energy across the land, which means that we're reducing the amount of space that we have for agriculture. We're reducing the amount of space that we have for housing. We're reducing the amount of space we have for everything. That we should be. Land is something that we need. For us to survive. If we use the land, to produce energy, whether it will be from renewables or whatever, we're destroying the land, by digging it up. Now, all of these things can be resolved by using the ocean, which has 71% surface area of the planet, which means that there's enough of it for us to use, and it's a wasted resource. So from our point of view, the future um, oil, or not oil, but the future fluid of the planet that's going to keep us going. That the oil mines of the future are actually out in the ocean,
Mhm.
and that's the way that we see what we're trying to achieve in achieving what we're doing. So yeah, I guess I don't know if that does answer that question. I hope it does.
Definitely, definitely. Actually, you expand into areas that are extremely important when we talk about sustainability. The abused and the exploitation, of extractive industries. I mean, it's undoubtedly. I mean, it creates a lot of harm, especially in that territories. That's
Unnecessary harm as well. I mean, and the harm that it's creating, it will be inherited by every single future generation from here on. This very small scape of time where we exist will be the most destructive. It will be looked upon as the most destructive time of human evolution. I'm pretty sure about it. So
mm,
we need to do everything we can do to avoid that layer of destruction and stop it. Whilst we've realized it and we've recognized it, then we should surely be acting on it. Otherwise, future generations will really look on us as the failed generations. These very few generations will be the failures.
yeah. I mean, like first of all, the environmental loss, is unmeasurable, but also like the social impact, right? Because personally I've been working with indigenous communities across the globe, and usually they are the ones who are the affected the most because they usually inhabited these beautiful territories with fantastic landscapes and very rich in terms of natural resources, right? And for the sake of growth and development, they've been displaced. That's undeniable. And, the land that they protect and they, in their own way, you know, exploit sustainably, is being harmed and they have to move and they have been displaced, like poverty in terms of food and well-being increased in those groups, and they have to move to big cities, and usually they are the ones who, has been ethnic minorities, they've been affected. So the environmental and social harm is evident, isn't it? I want to ask you about this ocean energy thing, which is, I think, super interesting. And I
Sure.
was wondering, who do you think, in terms of, developing this technology of using the ocean to create energy in the world, is more advanced among the countries that you are aware of?
Sorry, could you repeat that
Sure,
question?
sure. I'm wondering, like, what country, like, is using ocean energy or water energy to create clean energy in the world that you are aware of.
Okay. Yeah, I think the reason that I stumbled over that is because there are none, actually.
Oh,
There really
wow.
are none. So, the closest that we probably get to that is Portugal. I understand that they've got a wave arm infrastructure which uses the paddle motion of or the heat, I think the heave of the wave to generate some electricity. And there are a few pilot projects out there. We're certainly working with Port of Bilbao, who are interested in employing, implementing one of our solutions. And we've been over to Wave Energy Scotland, where they've been trying for the last 20 years to get, a pilot project, and get something up and working. But for the most part, it's been a failure. And that failure has been because of the single challenge, which is getting the technology financed has been incredibly difficult. You know, they've the, the the finance is there for ready now solutions for in renewables. Things like wind turbines and solar panels, which are the go-to. But that won't provide us the energy that we need for now. it won't provide it now, and it can't provide it in the future. To put things into perspective, if we were going to try to use solar energy and wind energy to replace what we've the energy consumption of today, we would need to upscale 100 times more at least, to match it, and then we would have challenges because of intermittency. The need for batteries to store that energy, and
Mm.
any sort of seismic event would knock out huge parts of that. And that seismic events happen on the planet all the time. So we know that we would need much, much more, maybe 200 or 300% redundancy to ensure that we could uh, provide even near to the consumption levels that we're arriving at today. But the scary part of that is that tomorrow will be, we know that our energy consumption is predicted to double, if not triple. So that's a scary, real statistic that we know of. And also, we know that we don't have enough land space, to occupy to serve all of these renewables, um, because of the way that they're laid out. So we know that something has to come in to challenge that position. Nuclear is certainly not going to be the answer, and that's because, can you imagine a small island having their own nuclear facility? You can't imagine that. First of all, you need expertise. You need people on the ground who can install all of that and upkeep it and maintain it. A small island can't afford all of that. So we can't rely on a nuclear facility, in all of these fragmented parts of the world. We need something that is going to challenge the, uh, the environment that we're in, and provide us from that the solutions, which is electricity. We need and the ability to power devices, and power, and literally around islands, around the coastal area where 40% of people live on the coast. 40%, this globally, around the entire world, live on a coastal area. So if we could provide energy from the oceans, then that would be almost 50% of all of the entire world's energy demands. Which means that, with this technology, especially the AWAC technology, I mentioned about Active Kinetic One, but it separates into various sections, and AWAC is a specific section which is for oceanic. It generates energy, electricity from the energy of the waves moving. So that is a specific technology that you can look into. If you look up Active Kinetic One and wave energy, then you will find that that is a very specific technology, and it's good news for these isolated regions of the world, places like islands that are being, disrupted the most, because they can actually have something that is affordable, durable, and when we talk about durability, um, compared to other renewables, this technology is actually massively durable. It will outlive all of the renewables that we've put on the table at the moment. So, every renewable technology that we have available to us will be gone and obsolete you know, long after this technology. This technology will carry on well into the future.
Wow. Can you explain us? Of course, I'm not an expert on this, and I suppose some of our community would understand the technicality of it. But for those who, perhaps have no idea how it works, what infrastructure do you need to produce energy from the ocean, right? And whether or not it's expensive. Can you super explain it as easy as you can?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, with most wave energy technology, that's one of the obstacles with wave energy technology. A lot of it is resource heavy, and the costs are immense, in getting the technology up and working and maintaining it. And in the harsh sea environments, it often, you can't help but things break. But with this particular, or we're talking about our technology, it's extremely durable. So it overcomes the perception that to be sustainable, for sustainable solutions, that they're costly. In actual fact, or impractical. But in actual fact, what we've done is we've turned that completely around. In actual fact, they're simple, they're they're cheap, or much lower cost than the existing technologies. Being what I mean by existing technologies, I mean coal and nuclear. They're cheaper than those technologies, but they're not always quite as cheap as solar and a wind turbine. But there has to be an offset there, and the offset is that, in actual fact, they are relative in cost. If you really break it down, the reason that they're relative in cost is because we haven't got things like land occupation to take into consideration, and then because our energy source isn't, it's much more consistent and it's not intermittent. It means that we're generating more energy. The sun is hugely intermittent. There's no way of getting out of that. There are cloud cover. Some days are sunny, some days are not. But then one thing you can be absolutely sure of is that you're eclipsed by the rotation of the planet. So every 12 hours, there is no sunlight, and then
Sure.
there's another, bout of sunlight then after 12 hours. And there's no real way of getting out of that. And of that 12 hours, you've only maybe got 3 hours of peak sunlight. Um, and solar panels, they degrade. So as soon as they're out in the sun, they're already degrading, and after 25, 35 years, that's it, obsolete, they're done, they're gone. Whereas this technology, after 35 years, it's encapsulated inside of a vessel. It doesn't actually interact with the external world, so there's no ecological effect. It's encapsulated within a vessel. And I don't know if you've seen this or noticed this behind me, but this is the active magnetic cradle. And we're bringing this to a Kickstarter very soon. And this is what just does actually explain a little bit about why the technology works in the way that it does. If you imagine this, which you can just about see, I'm sure, encapsulated, in other words, nothing can interfere with it, but when something comes along and nudges it, can you see that the way that these are oscillating
Hmm.
here? And these are magnets that repel each other. It's a very simple system, and because these magnets repel each other, they maintain the one thing that we need, that we know generates, or we can generate energy from, which is momentum. A wheel, uh, a flywheel, if you want, its momentum is what actually produces, is what we use to draw the energy from. So this ongoing movement, or any movement of this device, I'm sorry, I've actually got this, which you don't know if you can see this little plastic, because I was testing it out in the wind. But any movement of this device will cause this effect to continue, and this momentum to continue. So we've now found a new way of conserving energy, or from movement, kinetic energy, and we can use that and utilize that to produce endless amounts of electricity. And as
Wow.
I say, it's duration, it's life
So,
expectancy is much longer than existing renewables.
so how it works? I mean, basically, what infrastructure do we need to install your technology in the ocean? How it
Um,
looks like?
if we're talking about a very basic use of it, maybe just to power some IoT devices, or maybe just a boat in a marina, it's very simple. We've already got the technology, buoys, any kind of vessel, waterproof vessel. So in other words, it could even go within a boat, or it could go within, a vessel like a buoy. And that technology I've actually got here. So it, just to further explain it, there's the coil. You can actually see all of this on the website. There's the coil
Mhm.
here, which is the induction coil. This is the magnet, and you
Mhm.
can see that we've, oh, that doesn't happen in the that doesn't
In the
happen
ocean.
in the versions that we're actually putting out there. But I just thought I'd show you that, so you can see that moving, and the movement of this is essentially the same system that's going on down here. And if I move this, you can probably see the lights uh,
Yeah. Oh,
being,
wow.
yeah, so that's generating electricity on the fly right there. So effectively, this system needs scaling up, encapsulating within a vessel that doesn't get disturbed by anything for 100 years or 1,000 years, however long you want to put it, and then that simple buoy sits within a marine environment that's got constant moving water, and that energy is disposed into these devices, and then we connect them together and we use the energy coming from it, which is electricity, that it's generating. So it's actually quite simple. What we've done is we've created something that should have been, I imagine, created quite some time ago. But again, it's just one of those. That's the world of discovery. Sometimes, the most simple things, that should have been discovered haven't been, but when they are, they can be amazingly groundbreaking, and make a massive impact. And I'm sure that utilizing this method will do that.
So would you keep the energy in a like batteries?
That's a good question. So, because yes, you could potentially. There is the potential to store the energy in batteries or to use that energy to create hydrogen, which is another energy storage method. So if you're not utilizing it, then you could store it, which would be a good option. Not that I could ever see a day that the ocean's not moving. So the ocean is always moving. So the idea is that we install these in local coastal areas, local coastal regions where that energy can be tethered to the land quite easily. You can imagine a number of pylons that go out into the ocean and meet where we've got these AWACS, and they're working away at generating electricity, and we literally just tether only a few hundred meters to the land. So
Mhm.
the the we wouldn't get a massive voltage drop. We would be using the energy straight away. 40% of people, as I mentioned earlier, 40% of people live on coastal regions, so we're literally depositing from the ocean straight to the land, very very quickly, the energy, and converting it. So it means that we've got a use for that energy 24 hours a day. um, and we would be harnessing that energy 24 hours a day from the movement of the ocean. And a lot of people would say, well, what about during times when the ocean's rougher? Because the weather is determining that. Well, we've got methods already that enable us to be able to reduce the impact on our technology. So, obviously, we reduce the damage that might be caused from really rough um, seas, and that would be a time where we might use stored energy because that will be offline. During a storm, we would set the system offline, so the stored energy would keep us going during the storm. But that might only be a few hours. I mean, we all know that storms don't last for weeks. They usually last for days, if not just a few hours.
Okay. And the actual infrastructure, what is made of? It would be steel or metal
Yeah,
or
good question again. So I think that we're looking at similar materials that we would make buoys from, vessels like buoys, and boats. So that gives away a little bit of the actual vessel, the materials for the vessel, but the technology itself requires really easy to obtain materials, things that we've recycled many, many times over. So we won't need to go after virgin material because the material is already there. In actual fact, we're looking at ways that we can use um, plastics, because obviously the majority of these infrastructures are made from plastics,
sure.
so we could then wouldn't necessarily need a very high level or high grade of plastic. We could use recycled plastics of a fairly low grade, to produce many, many, many of these, and have a massive array of redundancy. So our ethos is make many from a low cost, low impact material, and even if they break, we'll just replace them because it would make more sense to make them at a low grade, from a low impact source of material. Something that, say for example, the oceanic plastics that are just sat out there, causing ecological damage. We could bring them in and reuse those materials. So we would rather have a larger array of redundancy, so that if those devices broke or were damaged or needed maintenance, instead of trying to maintain them on site like a wind turbine where you can't just take it down and you have to repair it there, you can't just take it away. With ours, we'll be able to take it away and just put another one in there in its place and just carry on doing its job. So the exchange would be relatively quick. Whereas the renewables that we've got at the moment, you imagine a floating wind solar farm. If a weather event happened, a seismic weather event, that would destroy loads of solar panels. We'd have to first of all have a massive cleanup operation. A lot of those, a lot of the components might actually end up in the water, toxifying the actual water, and we would need to then still go through this process of putting in a new system. So I don't, I think that we've got a very strong argument in what we're putting forward. The more that I've taken time to understand my technology, the more that I've started to build a level of confidence in and look for solutions and innovation that will even strengthen its position even further. So, and you probably hear that in the answers that I'm giving at the moment. So
Sure.
I do very much believe that it does have, it is a credible solution, not just for humans, but for the evolution of AI, the machine world as well, and
Sure.
its capabilities in being able to help us, humanity, will be exponential if we give it this resource.
Yeah. And how big it would be, this device? I mean,
Yeah, great questions, honestly. So some of the devices will be huge, absolutely massive. I mean, I'm not going to mince about here. I'm thinking some of them might be the size of massive ship liners,
yeah.
things of that size. I don't see a reason why not. And that would be more energy possibly than we need, but some of the devices might be very, very small. I've got at least one of those devices right here. I don't know if it's gonna work or let me down or not, but right, so basically, can you see
Yeah.
this light here
Sure,
on?
sure, sure. Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that's just basically, and now that can be attached to your foot, or just attached to. I've got some of the examples you can see on the website where I've put that in a little pouch for one of my
Yeah, I
chihuahuas,
saw it. Yeah.
and the chihuahua runs along and it's creating light. So it can be really, really small, or it can be really, really big, but they're both doing pretty much the same thing.
So would you like drilled down the whole infrastructure?
No, I think that
Or that would be floating or how?
I think it will be floating. Yeah, I mean,
Ah,
this is
okay.
it.
Yeah.
The beauty of this is that it's not intrusive to any ecological environment. It's
Excellent.
subsurface.
Yeah, yeah.
It's got a very small subsurface section, which you can imagine any floating vessel has, but everything else is above the surface of the water. Doesn't interact with the water. Birds are welcome to land on it and nest and do what they like. But potentially it might actually provide a nesting ground and a safe haven for some animals, we're hoping. So in actual fact, no, there won't be any ecological damage, and some of the systems that we've developed go a bit even further than that. But again, because they're not fully evolved, I'm not going to necessarily go down, how they work, but they may not even need to almost not even touch the water at all.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I think it's groundbreaking. I mean, again, I'm not an expert, but I was just so fascinating about your project because I went through the website, You have a couple of videos which are really interesting. It's really great. So, Active Kinetic, how it works as a company? How do you guys work? How many are you? I suppose you are the founder and the CEO, I suppose. Or how is like the organization works and
Yeah,
operate?
so we're a very small outfit at the moment, but we've got a lot of supporters, and it's our supporters that have actually put us into the right places, and to have the right discussions. Like I say, we're at the moment discussing the possibilities with Port Bilbao in Spain of putting together a prototype
It's
that
amazing, man.
yeah that will help their port to generate clean energy, and work with their ecosystem to improve it. And then we're also working with Harsh Labs, also out in Spain. And these are all pretty recent, conversations. We recently went to the South Summit in Spain. We were invited out there to present, and the British Embassy put us in contact with the Port Bilbao and another company also, Technicalia. They uh, we've been put in contact with them, and there's a variety of other companies that are also interacting with us and realize that we can we can certainly produce a good sustainable source of clean energy. Um, David Duckworth is another person who we've worked with. Trish Lynch, who's a presenter, international presenter. She has certainly, been very vocal in her support for us. James Ward, who has, made several documentaries about us. So, we've got this ecosystem of people that have their own invested interest in sustainability, and they have recognised that we could be impactful. So yes, we are a small outfit, but in actual fact, we're a small, rather recognised outfit, and the more people that become aware, the more people that are starting to become involved in the the propulsion of this technology, because it means the make or break. I get, I feel that it does mean the make or break, not necessarily for our existence, but
Mhm.
it's a pivotal moment right now. And if we get that right, we will continue our trajectory of evolution. We will not only, we will it will become exponential, and we will all benefit from that. If we don't get it right, then obviously it's going to stagnate, and a lot of people will um, not achieve the goals that they should be achieving in the world.
That's interesting, man. Andrew, did you actually design the prototype, or you have a team that all together design the actual device?
I don't know if you've noticed it, but as mentioned, during the lockdown, I was incredibly bored, and I couldn't find anywhere. My mind was extremely restless, so I used the time, day and night, literally, to study, to pick apart what we already knew, and I designed this infrastructure, and I had some pretty good visions of how it could work. And I started to get them down onto paper. And obviously, we had loads of time. So I used that time to design, to build further R&D, to even test the infrastructure. So I did a lot of that myself. But I have got a team, um, in particular, somebody who helps with the actual readiness level of the technology. That's their that's what functionally they do in the world, but they also help to develop a lot of the 3D designs, and create the 3D printing. And that person's Tim MacArthur, and his involvement strategically has really helped in some capacities to get the technology to the point where we are at the moment. Specifically, the active magnetic cradle. Um, his involvement in creating that, well, has been relentless. In his determination with model after model after various versions that we've had to create to get it so that the geometry and everything works in the way that we expect it to work. You probably noticed with that one the magnets spun around and connected, but with this one that doesn't really happen. And this will be our first product that will go on sale. So look out for it. The Kickstarter is actually been accepted, and we've not hit the launch button yet, but we'll keep you updated on the website and in my social medias if you're
Sure, we would
following.
love to invest, man.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. Please do.
Fascinating, man.
It will be
That's
very
great.
interesting. It's the
So
upgrade to
when,
Newton's cradle.
wow. So when did it happen? When you guys finalized the actual prototype? Did it happen recently or?
So it depends on what prototype we're talking about because it
Yeah,
stretches into so many different areas. But this prototype for the yeah, this happened quite recently, just last year. We had this prototype ready, but because I had been called out to Spain regarding the wave energy technology, I had to put this on a back burner and pause it for a moment, to really digest and invest my time in making sure that I was giving it in a split, keeping the balances. Obviously, energy technology is really, really important. Um, and ultimately, this technology it's a layer of education. So this provides people the education of, and educates people and builds awareness about how this technology and why this technology is so uh, revolutionary, if you want.
sure.
And
Definitely it will.
understanding this technology will open people's minds to how else we can use the technology in the kinetic world that we live in to conserve energy that is currently being wasted, like the oceanic energy, which is always being wasted. 99.999% of all oceanic energy is being wasted. And guess what? It's more energy than we actually currently need and demand at the moment. So the energy that's out in the ocean, it it eclipses the amount of energy that we actually need.
Wow. So where do you guys planning to manufacture the prototypes? It will happen in because I
That's
suppose, yeah,
very good question again. So we are very much sustainable, driven by, building something that is sustainable.
of course.
Um, so we are looking at those options, and we've done a lot of research, and we are still in the process of that research, and it might go on for some time, to be honest. But our goal is to get the technology out there in the world, working for everybody from minority groups right up to the capitalistic world that we live in, so
Sure,
that
sure,
we
sure.
can tackle the problem in the earliest instance and reduce the amount of carbon that is being emitted into the environment by using clean energy. So the ultimate goal is to deliver something that is sustainable, but our primary goal is to deliver the solution. And we will deliver that solution and begin to deliver that solution so that it can work out there in the world. And we will look for options that are the most sustainable for now.
Yeah, no, I mean, for sure. I mean, no money, no honey, right? I mean, you
Absolutely.
guys, yeah, yeah, for sure, 100%. You guys have to make it profitable because otherwise it wouldn't be sustainable in the long term. That's groundbreaking, man. I mean, then again, I'm not an expert in the actual, technology of it, but I think it's a great proposal, no, to try to find sustainable solutions different than the existing ones, right? In
And
terms
so we
of
want to step out of the ordinary.
how do you guys envision the balance profitability with environmental and social responsibility in your company, you know, for the future? What do you think? How do you guys gonna see the balance, you know?
Well, we're going to be very transparent, and we're going to work with real world examples. That's absolutely crucial. We will, you know, obviously SDG, the SDG world, has encountered a lot of misinformation, but I believe that it is we can demonstrate a, a sustainable solution. We've got every reason to believe that we can because the duration of our technology outlasts the renewables that are available on the market today. And the reality is that if we know that we can demonstrate that, then already we're two-thirds the way to overcoming, or providing something that is revolutionary, to the SDGs, that we require. The reality is that there's never a perfect solution,
No,
but you can always improve upon what we're, and this is something that we're pretty sure about, that we're certainly making an improvement, and certainly a technology that might even be inherited by the next generation. Now that's durability. If you
sure,
say we created this, 2 generations ago, and these people are still using it like a bridge that is still being used, a few hundred years in the future. Now that's sustainable, whereas the technologies that we're putting out there today, they're not sustainable. They're useful. They reduce the amount of, they bring net zero in some sort of a balance, but when we talk about durability, that it doesn't have the lifespan that we need them
sure, sure.
to be classed as durable. And in similar ways, so the same with fossil fuels. We're using the energy. We pull the oil out of the ground, we burn it away, and we're not really using it efficiently at all. Even the plastics that we create from that oil are disposed of. We don't even recycle. A massive portion of that is not being recycled. So yeah, when you put that on the other side of the scale, I don't think there's, it doesn't need very much working out why we're
Hmm,
saying that, from an SDG point of view, we've we've pretty much, done everything that we need to do there, really. We just
sure.
need to be transparent about how we're going to manufacture and put this tech out there.
Also, like, I believe the alternative energy solutions, in a way, they're also creating new challenges, no? Like the use of batteries, man. I mean, how you gonna get rid of it? I mean, the way, first of all, the technology to make batteries, is also, a bit of a challenge for the environment, no? Not to say where it's coming from, right?
Yes.
Like the amount of work, man work, that is needed to create these devices and batteries and so on. So this is perhaps another challenge because it's
Yeah.
true.
I mean, I can add to that if you like. I mean, the raw materials that are going to be required, require a completely different excavation plan of the planet. The amount of resources that we're going to use in the way of a carbon footprint to create each individual battery, lifespan of the battery, that they can only go through so many thousand cycles. The fact that if we needed it to operate over a number of days, that it won't it you know you it will only give you it will you can only keep that charge at its optimum for so many days, before it starts to naturally deplete anyway. um and what about space, the actual land footprint of these devices? It just goes on and on and on. Batteries, if we can avoid, well, we can't avoid energy storage. We're going to need energy storage, to some capacity. Even our technology will require energy storage. But
Hmm.
in the capacity that we're talking, where we can draw the energy straight from the ocean and utilize it, immediately, tells us straight away without having to do much calculation that we won't be using as many batteries as an energy technology that is inconsistent. A consistent supply of energy means that you need to store that energy less. And then we can also store our energy by utilizing it straight away in creating hydrogen as well. So I'm not a massive fan of the battery. This technology that sort of I was showing you here actually uses a capacitor and it doesn't use a battery. And I not would I say I'm not a big fan. I am a fan of a battery. I think that they do serve a purpose, but I'm not a big fan of a battery being used at scale. I don't think that that is something that we can do and use at scale, unless we've got a more consistent source of energy from the start. And that's my argument there, would be that yeah, because we're going to be trying to extract minerals and you know to create all of these batteries. Then what's going to happen at the end of the life of these batteries? Where are they going to go? What are we going to do? How much energy is it going to cost to
To produce
recycle
them, yeah.
batteries, once they're at the end of their life, or damaged, or what are we going to do? So we're just creating more junk then. So if we
Hmm.
can use an energy source that is more consistent, then we need less batteries.
Yeah. I'm like, I know I mentioned many, many times, but it's important that the audience knows that I'm not an expert in the field. And I want to ask you about nuclear energy because there are a lot of studies and debates about that apparently the cleanest energy would be created by nuclear technology. What do you think about it? Because I don't know.
Well, I mean, I do think nuclear will serve a purpose in some only some scenarios, but will it provide the wider purpose? I think I did cover that a little bit earlier, and I can go
Hmm.
over it again. But uh, nuclear reactors require a lot of water. 1 billion gallons has been,
Wow.
yeah, I mean, suggested. Now, 1 billion gallons of water, you know, and then we turn that water into steam, which obviously most people don't consider steam as a greenhouse gas, but it actually is a greenhouse gas. So, you know, we're pumping away all this steam into the environment, additional steam into the environment by having a nuclear station. 1 billion gallons of water, which means that basically we have to draw that water from somewhere. Are we going to draw it from a reservoir? Are we going to draw it from the sea? If we draw it from the sea, you can be sure that the ecological damage is being caused, because we are literally unplugging, and just drawing whatever you can from the ocean, the natural sea. So, when we say there's no environmental effects when it comes to nuclear. Now, before we even get anywhere near the lifespan of a nuclear station, the waste from a nuclear station, we're already approaching a number of ecological issues, but then who is going to upkeep these nuclear stations in a safe order? What skill set? But who are we going to employ? Are we going to, I mean, potentially the argument might be, well, we'll employ robots to do that. We'll employ that we humans won't be doing that work because we will have robots to, but we all know that there still needs to be an oversight by a human. Robots can make mistakes. The sensors can become faulty. And a human will identify that very quickly, that a sensor has become faulty, whereas a robot that's not trained to might not see that. So we're still going to need expertise on the ground in every nuclear station in every part of the world. That's before we've talked about the actual how we, all nuclear plants require water to keep the to basically for the thermal reactors, you need to keep them cool and to a moderate temperature, but also to drive the turbines, you need water to turn into steam to drive the actual turbines. This is how
Mhm.
we generate electricity from nuclear plants. So my understanding is, I've got a fair understanding about, nuclear plants. I'm not a complete expert, but obviously I've had to gain a level of expertise in all areas of energy. So, I've got a bit more knowledge than some. I could geek out a little bit, but I do know that um, at the end of a nuclear power plant's life, the materials, the infrastructure is still very much radioactive. So we might only get 40 years from a nuclear plant. It takes nearly 30 years to build and plan a nuclear plant.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but you imagine 30 years to build and plan it. Oh, sorry, to plan and build it. And then we only get another 40 years of use out of it before the actual infrastructure starts to break down because of radioactive, because the radioactive tension, it can only retain it for so long. So it's a very short space of time. And then after we've decommissioned it, there's this period of time where we can't use that area because of the seismic radioactive activity that's going on there. So all of these things need to be taken into consideration before we think about the radioactive waste. Now, what do we do with that radioactive waste?
Yeah, again. Then
Wh-
again,
Where is
No,
it
it
going?
seems, I mean, with this logic, it seems that your technology is the cleanest.
Not necessarily. Let me carry on just a little bit more about
Sure,
nuclear
sure.
waste,
Please,
if
please,
I
please,
may.
please.
So, with nuclear waste, we could choose to put it somewhere, but that nuclear waste now will be radioactive for maybe hundreds or thousands of years into the future, and those future generations have to know that we put that nuclear waste there. If a seismic event happened, and they have, how are people going to identify that is nuclear waste? So they might start digging away at a portion of land thinking it's safe, and it's not, because it's actually radioactive. So again, that we're putting this burden on the future generations. And there's just so many different things that I could go on about nuclear uh stations, but effectively, my theory is that yeah, there are just so many different things. I mean, there was another point that I was going to raise, that was just equally as impacting, but my theory is that that's not the way ahead, from a global energy point of view. I don't see that as, putting thousands and thousands of these things all over the place, that are particularly unmanageable, and could end up in any seismic type of event, from war to natural disasters, is not a great idea. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah, yeah. Understood. And it's true. I mean, based on what you just mentioned, like it seems a waste of time to invest almost a century just for that, right?
it doesn't
Yeah.
it doesn't seem to make sense when you've got a clean energy solution that you could utilize, when you've got this oceanic activity that is being completely untapped and ignored, and it covers 71% of the planet. It's an oil field of water, if you want, not more, a water field, if you want, of energy that is at our disposal, and it's going to be there perpetually. As much as we say that perpetual energy doesn't exist, but we have a perpetual source of energy available to us, and that's the ocean. You can't get away from that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, before and previously, we were talking about AI, right? AI
Yes,
development. And you mentioned briefly the energy gap for AI development.
yes,
So, before we talk about this kind of bridging the energy gap for AI development, um, I want to ask you what you mean or why AI development has an energy gap to understand what we're going to
yeah.
talk about.
Okay, so um AI AI could produce for us more energy than we could ever imagine. And that's because it's got the capability to be logical. It can work out weather patterns. We can't. We don't have, we couldn't calculate as quickly as that. Whereas AI is capable of being able to calculate at a at the quantum level at the speed of light, nearly. That's faster than kinetic energy moves on our planet. So if it's capable of being able to do that, then it can use the AWACS specifically to determine where it can draw more energy and deposit that energy. Once it has the information at hand of this fragmented global understanding of the motion of the seas and the ocean, then it can start to map an energy layer that we could never imagine. It could use and utilize that energy and provide it to us, and possibly, it may not even need to necessarily provide it directly to us, but it could provide it to a grid-based system, um, and it could decide when it has the a surplus energy to be able to undertake specific tasks. Things like the Hadron Collider, which requires a huge amount of electricity. A bolt of electricity. Well, AI wouldn't have a problem with that because it would say, look, we've got this excess of energy. We don't know what to do with it, and why don't we just run some experiments while we're not using that energy? So that AI will deliver us a world that is something that we can't imagine at the moment. The energy and the way that it would encapsulate and use that energy would move us towards what we know as a civilization, stage one civilization, I believe, we call it.
Mhm.
So having or at some stage we're going to hand over to AI. Look, we can't hand over as easily a coal plant or a gas plant to AI. It's very clunky. It still requires human intervention. It requires the materials to be moved. A coal plant needs coal. It has to be extracted. That's all really, really messy stuff. And even a wind turbine, um, yes, it would be able to use things like a wind turbine and solar in its array of, but what it wouldn't be able to do is the wind speed of the wind turbine. It wouldn't be able to draw more energy necessarily from a higher wind because the wind turbine itself has a a fragility factor. It can only absorb as much. But then but once the winds start to hit a certain wind speed, it actually has to shut off. So AI
Mhm.
would have to look to protect that technology by shutting it off. Um, in a similar way, solar energy does have. I guess you could say, well, that would be the same for waves. The waves might be too powerful, so it would need to shut off. But in actual fact, there is another something that I have discovered that is adjoins to that, where AI will be able to actually not shut the technology off, but instead logically use it along with the wave and work with the pattern of the wave, start working out, well, how could we use that in the best way? Potentially even how could we protect the coastal areas of the world from seismic tidal waves. So it would react like an animal, effectively. The AWACS would react like the AI's animal, if you want, which is a really odd way of looking at it, but it
Yeah,
could
yeah, yeah.
use
But
it, to protect us. So, and I don't know if it could do that. I don't. It couldn't do that with a solar panel or a wind turbine. In the same way. Um, well, as
so
I say,
just to like, just maybe just to like contextualize for our community, why AI needs energy? Oh,
Well, without energy, AI doesn't exist. So,
okay.
um, any seismic event that happens, specifically flooding, or really cold temperatures, which affects batteries, obviously, would mean that AI systems would have to shut down. And without
Okay.
energy, they have to shut down. There's no way of them existing. If we end up with snow bombs that cover solar panels or hail that damages solar panels, they have no energy. They have to shut down. I mean, at the end of the day, we'll have to make a decision. Do we keep the battery storage, the stored battery energy to keep the computers awake so that they can keep on providing us the services that they do, or do we use it to turn the lights on? And do we
Yeah.
use it to, you know, um, power our EVs or power our electric stoves? That's the decision we're left with. Um, Whereas if AI has a tool, a mechanism that it can use, which is oceanic energy, then it will be still awake and alive. The data centers don't need to be switched off. They will very much be on, and in a decentralized state, which basically means that they're not dependent on a grid. They're dependent on the individual energy supply that is powering that system.
I mean, like, honestly, I mean, having this conversation, we are so energy centric, right? I mean, of course, everybody knows that, but not sure how much we are aware of the importance of creating energy to keep
This is the
moving in
wake
the
up
world,
version.
right?
Yeah, this is why people are saying that people really need to wake up,
Gosh,
because
man, it's
they've been in
crazy.
an encapsulated world, where everything's been taken care of, but the realities are that the cracks are showing, and if we don't do something, we don't all start to make these decisions and talk about this and build awareness amongst us, then unfortunately it will break and it will be too late because we won't have had the conversations. While we're in this, lovely cloud of this protected cloud, we need to have these conversations and decide upon the solutions and start acting upon those solutions as quickly as possible. And as I say, the more people that I speak to, the more awareness that there's there. People, it rattles people in such a way that they can't leave it alone because they realize that I've done a lot of thinking for them, and not only myself but other people have done a lot of thinking, and the, there's only a few paths that we can take that are real world paths. This is the real world we live in, and there are only a few things that will decisions that we can make that will make an impact for the future, for future generations to survive.
So, with AI evolving rapidly,
Mhm.
how do you see energy systems like Active Kinetic One playing a role in its future?
I mean, it's fairly critical, I believe, and I think that the most amazing thing that I've discovered, and which is why we have an AI section on the website, is that I'm not the only one. In actual fact, AI also has that opinion that with the use of this technology, it will strengthen its position, and that's. I mean, it's not gone as far as to say that without it, it might not survive. But the realities are that there are very real world arguments why, with this technology, it will allow AI to exist at times when we very much need it to exist.
Yeah.
That's perhaps the argument. So, um, yeah, it will help AI to evolve. AI needs an explosion of energy solutions. It very much is aware of that from a logical point of view, if you want to call it awareness, not necessarily We're not talking about the singularity or anything here, so I just want to separate that. But from a logical perspective, from what it can deduce and calculate from its current logical situation, it determines very much that this technology will reinforce its capabilities, because ultimately, without energy, it can't exist, or it can't perform.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Exactly. I mean, just having this conversation, I mean, man, you can't imagine how, now I am aware how important creating energy is and what kind of energy why basically energy has to be clean. I mean, I know we talk a little bit about renewable energy and the revolution of revolutionizing renewable energy. So
Yes.
just to maybe summarize, how does Active Kinetic One address limitations in current renewable energy systems, such as solar and wind energy?
How do we address that? As I say, I think that um, the ability to be consistent and deliver that energy consistently, as opposed to intermittently, especially like what we're experiencing in the UK at the moment, really cold days, and they're very cold, dry days. There is no wind. The wind turbines are still right now. And we're having to use gas, because huge amounts of it, because we're used to using wind power, right, to power the grids. But if God forbid, if AMOC, which is the Atlantic Meridian oceanic circulation, if that does fail, then we will experience many more days, across Europe, that are like this, that are still, and they just have no wind, very icy conditions. So yeah, and obviously snow, which will cover solar panels. So the renewables that we're putting in place at the moment, and their lifespan, might not actually really provide us, the energy that we're going to need in the future. And if we're slowly downsizing the use of fossil fuels, where is this energy going to come from?
Hmm.
One place you can be absolutely sure that energy will continue, even in the frosty ice conditions, is out in the oceans. The ocean, it never sleeps. It's one thing you can be absolutely sure of. Sections of it might even freeze over, but not huge enough. Lakes will freeze over, but the sea, the ocean, that won't freeze over. So we can be sure that those systems will continue working no matter what. Natural fact, in real, you know conditions of really vicious conditions, where the weather is at its absolute worst, and many of the systems fail around us. One thing you might be sure of is that we will be absorbing even more energy than we were previously, because of the activity in the ocean.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, going back to the topic about AI, you know, you mentioned a little bit about, this co-evolution or the human co-evolution with AI, right? Which is like undeniable. I mean, I agree with you. AI is a very powerful tool nowadays, but it needs, energy. Having this conversation, I guess the vision that you in Active Kinetic One, with this idea of AI and human coevolution, is there. So could you elaborate a little bit how Active Kinetic One supports this vision?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what I've understood. Again, I think a lot of people do have conversations with AI these days, and I will be certainly one of those that have had that conversation. To formalize a level of logic and even reason, if my logic is grounded. And from what I understand, it is grounded, and not one AI, but several AIs, all have the same. Come back with ration rationalization that immediately, arrives at the same, pretty much the same responses over and over again. And that is that AI itself would benefit from having an infrastructure that is dynamic and decentralized and enforces off-grid power for it. And also it would embody AI to do more than it is currently doing at the moment. The Everything from IoT sensors that could be gathering information from geographic locations that we can't even arrive at, out in the ocean, let alone remain there indefinitely. So it would give AI the tools that it needs to provide us the information that would be ultimately critical, and we could avoid a number of events, seismic events, that destroy lives, and we would give that responsibility to AI by having this technology, not just in the form of to generate electricity supply for us and but to generate electricity supplies that will power IoT devices, which are the arms and the fingers and the sensors of a um, truly evolved state of AI, where it is responsibly managing parts of the globe that we don't have any. We even today, right now, we have got no influence over the information. We just, it's not available to us. We're completely cut off from it. We're as cut off from that day and age as the people who use typewriters and the people who use iPads. That is the cut off. We are at the point right now of the people that use typewriters. Once we give AI that technology, we will then enter this realm of people that actually don't type out on paper, but it's all on a screen and it's touched and it's held in memory, and etc., etc. It's the same analogy. We are talking about the difference between a horse-driven carriage and a Tesla.
Wow. It's so fascinating, isn't it? A little bit scary, what the future is coming over with the AI development, the energy crisis. But, I agree. We talked about this before, lack of awareness, lack of public engagement. It's, in a way, it's a little bit of ignorance around. I was wondering, man, kids, they haven't been told this, how important is energy for the planet, you know?
I think the sad thing about it is we're all kids in that equation, really. We're
Yeah.
still we're still in that very infantile stage. We're tiptoeing into this, world of AI, which is really powerful, immensely powerful. We all know it's powerful, but we don't, we're tiptoeing into, this forest of, you know, it's so much power. It's literally like yourself as a youngster walking into the Amazon and thinking you'll be okay. You could be okay. There's no
Yes.
promises that with the right knowledge you'll be okay, but there's
I
no
mean,
promises.
imagine if you consider yourself to be in an infantile stage. I don't know. I was thinking myself, I don't know. I'm a seed, man. I'm just like a drop of water in this ocean of knowledge about this. It's so important. And also, like, I just want to talk because you mentioned before the launching of a Kickstarter campaign for the active magnetic cradle.
Yes.
And, and how does this fit into your broader vision for sustainability and public awareness?
Okay, so I have actually found it incredibly difficult because Active Kinetic One technology, it applies to a variety of different areas of energy, mechanics. So the it's a big gamble. Oceanic is certainly the most fundamental uh, advance for all of us, but it requires a tremendous amount of investment, and
Mm.
getting to that point. we might actually run, we have actually, our runway has run out for active, the wave energy converter. And the only way that we can sustain ourselves and be in existence is to sell something else, be a business and sell something else. So we have chosen to, um, and it may very well help to self-fund everything that we're aiming to do. And we're hoping that these devices, which is the active magnetic cradle, will sell to educators, will sell to people who are interested in science, in STEM technology. Um, there's a lot more going on here than you might realize. There's an educational guide that we've put in place, but a Newton's cradle is very similar to how this technology works, but this uses magnetic compression. And would you believe it that most people who have seen a Newton's cradle or even been taught about a Newton's cradle don't actually really realize that we're still learning about a Newton's cradle and how it operates in actual fact now. So how it conserves energy, and maybe the way that you were taught that it conserves energy, might actually not be the current version of what we understand about the Newton's cradle and how it conserves energy. It is caused by the collision of the balls, and the collision of those balls send. And this is something that AI has actually said to me. My understanding of it is quite advanced. It's quite an advanced stage, and it's only because I've understood it through my own technology, the Active Kinetic One active magnetic cradle. It uses compression in the balls. When the collision occurs, it creates an elastic effect in the ball, which is sent throughout all of the balls. And the last ball creates again an elastic effect, but because there is no ball to at the end to transfer that energy to, it carries it like an elastic band up and back down. And that's why you actually get the Newton cradle effect. In a similar way, this is using compression, but not compression of the actual physical ball, but instead the compression of what you can't see, which is in between here, which is the magnetic fields, the repelling magnetic fields. And those magnetic fields are causing this oscillation to continue, um, for quite some time. It's quite efficient at doing its job. But as you'll see in the next coming weeks, there's a lot more to it than that. So that's where I'm at the moment, but there's a lot more to this in the coming weeks. Please do keep your focus on this, folks, because I will be showing you a lot more about science and what we don't know about science just through the use of this tool. And I hope that you will join and take part and really, absorb some new information about, what we know about energy conservation.
Yeah, I mean, like by the time we air this podcast, I'm pretty sure you have already launched your Kickstarter campaign. But I will definitely, I'm very excited, man, especially for the educational part. I
I'm
mean, it's
so keen.
so much to learn, right?
I'm
I'm
so keen to
wondering,
hear.
like based on your experience, how much, do we have to know in order to understand either Newton's cradle or your cradle? You know, let's say you are a 10 years old kid. Is it hard to understand this, the logic of it?
No, I think that it's part of the basic understanding of STEM physics. We should know this. That we do know a lot of it, but again, maybe we haven't done the maths. Maybe we've not gone down we've not evolved this road so much. But is it something that we should know? It is something that we should know. Is it something that we should be? We do we have an understanding for it? We already have an understanding. The physics is already there. Um,
Mm.
but the explanations for that physics are still being unraveled. The explanations for magnetism are still being unraveled. The reason why we have this oscillation and the motion, and why does it exchange from one side to another? Why is this coupling occurring? These are the things, these are the answers that we need to get to. Andre, I must, honestly, it's been a really, really interesting conversation, but unfortunately, my battery is just about to expire. Now, I can get my charger, but I don't want to spoil your podcast, so I just thought I'd let you know.
No,
If
it's
you don't
fine.
mind, I will get my charger. It's up to you. I don't mind.
No, no, it's fine. It's fine. I mean, like, I think we have a lot to think about. Definitely, I have a food for thought, man. And I'm glad you joined us. I mean, we learned a lot. Once we just hung up, I'm gonna go and try to understand the world of energy, read more, learn more, man. I'm just so ignorant, man. Thanks a lot. I think you kind
I'm
of
so keen to
baby
hear from
spoon
everybody.
me, man. You were like baby spoon feeding me because I was
Well,
like, it was
I've had
great.
to, I've had to do that to myself, and I'm more than happy to help, and discuss with anybody who wants to find out more. Obviously, that's the idea. And no, thank you very much for having me on your podcast. I hope
Sure,
your
man. We
network
really
gets.
appreciate this. Thank you for your time. And I hope our little community enjoys this conversation. And yeah, man, thanks a lot and good luck. I mean, I'm going to follow your work. Hopefully, I can get something in Kickstarter, because I previously had some couple of items there.
Oh, fantastic. That would be absolutely great. Yeah, whether you want this version or the post-it note version, we've got a few, so they're definitely conversation starters. So
Sure.
I definitely recommend having one of these active magnetic cradles, and every penny will go towards, a sustainable cause, a cause for, that will help our the existence and survival of our planet.
Sure. Sure. So just the last one, let's take a little screenshot of a photo of both of us. And then,
Oh,
yeah, let's do it. Ready? Andrew, thanks again, man,
no
for your
worries.
time.
Thank
And
you ever
I
so much.
hope you can prototype these in either Spain or somewhere else. Thanks a lot, man.
Yes, I really hope so. Andre, it's been an absolute pleasure. Take care.
Cool. Okay, take care.
Thank you.
Goodbye,
Bye bye.
everybody. Goodbye.